Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. So hello dear friends of Kardec Radio, and welcome back to the messengers in our home. Tonight we're going to have the second part of our summary of the book, and I'm here again with Mackenzie. Hello Mackenzie.
Hi Francisca, hello everyone, welcome back.
So just to make a bridge from last week, we finished with a quote: "The thought of a job well done, Andre, even when everyone is against us, is a strong light by day and a blessed pillow at night." So Vicente was doing his final reflections, reminding us of the mediumship and the life with Jesus and the necessity that the work should be in the focus of everything, like he says in this quote. So now they finished their stay at the Messenger Center. We are in chapter 14, entitled Preparations. And Aniceto is telling them that they're going to travel down to Earth, and they're going to make a stopover in another aid station. But before they go, they need some, he sends them to the magnetic aid chamber for sense enhancement. Because what we perceive with our senses is, it's not everything, obviously. And that's why they're going to make this treatment. And he reminds them that it's really, really important to use prayer as an individual commitment to God to support themselves, that the treatment that they receive, so that they can, so to speak, inverted commas here, see better later on, be successful. And he finishes the chapter saying, all our baggage is what we carry in our heart. Here we must carry purposes, energies, knowledge, and above all, the sincere willingness to serve. So nothing like we with our suitcases when we go on traveling abroad, etc. So they're going to make themselves or prepare themselves to go on a different route down to Earth, which they're very, they're impressed or puzzled, because they didn't know. They were used to being able to go down to Earth, volitating on an easy and well-maintained road. But now they're on a learning experience, so they are getting to know other parts of the spirit world as well. Right, Mackenzie?
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting how we can, how different people can see different things, and if a person is more prepared for a certain type of job or for a certain type of thing that the person always does, the person will see much more than our untrained eyes will see. Right, and basically that's the case with Aniceto and Vicente and Andre. Aniceto is not even, he does this more frequently, but he's more evolved, meaning that he's been through so many more things, and he decided to evolve prior to what Andre and Vicente decided. So he's way ahead of them. So it is how it is here on Earth as well, right? If I enter a house and if I clean houses, for example, I will see things that people who have untrained eyes for cleaning houses will not be able to see. That's basically what it is. And with this treatment that you mentioned, right, the magnetic treatment, it will help Andre and Vicente to notice more things on what they need, what they're about to learn how to do, which will be to look at people and serve other people and help other people to improve their lives. So, and then they keep going on to the aid station, right? We will know a few chapters from now that the aid station is called Campo da Paz, or Field of Peace, And on chapter 15, they start describing the journey where they're coming from Nosolar, from the messenger center there to this aid station. And although they keep in prayer for a long time, they start to see these very weird things on the pathway. They experience the absence of sunlight. They experience this cold. They see these dark places, some birds flying around, and what is this? And then Vicente says, well, this is the influence of our earth, right? Our incarnate earth, are the people from earth and their minds, what they're thinking and how they are creating their own world. And then it influences this whole atmosphere here that we are experiencing right now. And as Francisca just said, for everything that we need, if we are going to do something that's really worth it, let's keep praying. And that's what they do, right? Vicente and Andre, they keep, as he says, they remained in prayer for a long time when they noticed that because of what they are right now, they see this light coming from themselves, maybe because they are in a very dark place and now they are able to see it. But it only goes to show that not only the prayers help, but what we carry inside, in contrast with the dark place, where is the reflection of our bad thoughts, of our thoughts of destruction that we all unfortunately still have. And they keep going, right, Francisca? He mentions there's so many things in this chapter.
Yeah, that's true. I think what's interesting as well is that Aniceto explains to them that this entire world is an extension of our earth. Human eyes can see only a few aspects of the valley as they prepare themselves for real spirit sight. And he goes on talking about the successes of astronomy and science going to the outer space, into the inner space. But there's so much more to see that we cannot see as humans, because the law is that we must not see anything except what we can observe to our advantage. So we all have our limitations in perceiving not only things in the material plane here, but anything that it's more subtle, the influence of the spirit world, or even more what happens in the spirit world. But the important thing here is really that there's so much more for us to know, that we only get a glimpse of what is happening around us, and that's okay, because that is way more than we might be able to digest in all the details and all the descriptions that Andre offers for us. And as you said, the aid station is one of the aid stations of the colony Campo da Paz, or Field of Peace. And then suddenly the situation changes, because they see a splendid castle. So they have this difficult surroundings, the darkness, like you mentioned, and everything. But now, suddenly, they see that there is a castle. And the ambient is much more peaceful. And again, they receive all the necessary explanations, saying that the mental state of those who live in this resting place of fraternal assistance is reflected through the peace that you feel. We have just crossed a region of great spiritual conflict, even though you were not able to perceive it. Nature is a loving mother everywhere, but each place reflects the influence of the children of God who inhabit it. And that explains many different energy levels that we find here as well. You know, if you go into nature here, where nature is untouched, or mainly untouched by humans, we recharge ourselves much more quickly than if we go around in a busy city, which is clouded by the thoughts and the energies of the people there, of life that is going on there. So, and that's the chapter as well where he sees this painting of the martyrdom of Saint Denis, Apostle to the Gauls, painted by Florentine Bonnat. And it's really fantastic because Andre says, oh yeah, this is a replica because the original one is in Paris somewhere. And he said, Alfredo, who is the director, so to speak, of this aid station, says, no, you're mistaken. The original is in even a higher colony, but Florentine Bonnat came to visit one night, and he was so fascinated by this picture that he did everything he could to repaint it. He explained that he had this marvelous dream, but we know that he actually was in the spirit world and got inspired there. And so Andre realized that all high art on earth is sublime because it transmits the glorious vision of man and woman in the light of the higher planes. So as we know the spirit world to be the original world, and it's more like the earth is a copy, so to speak, from what we've seen and learned in the spirit world and not the other way around. But of course, many of us don't have that awareness yet, and we think it's the other way around, right?
Yeah, that's true. Although, and it's very important for us to remember that not Andre, I think Alfredo himself, he says at one point in the chapter that you are right. Some of the arts that we see here are reflection of what we think. I mean, there's no visit to a colony to paint every single painting that there is here on Earth, but some of them are really what happened to this specific one, which was really, really inspired by the other painting there on the spiritual realm. So it is very interesting to notice that we can have those connections and we can be inspired, and this just broadens our perception of how these great pieces of art, or some of them at least, came to be with the inspiration of the good spirits and of the higher realms. So it is very interesting. But as Aniceto says, as Alfredo says, well, enough digression for now. Let's move on. Well, he says, let's sit down, and then maybe you're tired, so let's eat. So they go to talk and to have something to eat and have some conversations, and we reach chapter 17, which is Alfredo's love story, where we will know a little bit more about Alfredo and Ismalia, which were the two spirits who were there to receive Aniceto, Vicente, and Andre. And Andre says at one point in chapter, I thought that Ismalia was your wife and she would be here with you at all times. To which Aniceto looks at them and as if saying, oh, you don't know half the story here. And then Alfredo says, well, maybe it would be too much for me to tell the story, but I think it's going to be good for me because I will unburden my heart. And it will be good for you because I know that you're going to help other people on earth, and maybe you can take a better understanding of what my story is so that you can use on what you're going to do. And then he tells his story with Ismalia, and he had all this problem. It's a long story, not going to tell the whole story, but the point is he was completely unfair and unjust to Ismalia, and she suffered quietly. She took everything as she needed to take, and she grew up, spiritually speaking, while he stayed behind, spiritually speaking or morally speaking, because he did so many terrible things. And when he wanted to fix everything, there was not enough time to do that. So unfortunately, and that's why he says, well, I'm still here, and Ismalia, it's in a different and higher level post. So she has been advised by their superiors, that Alfredo needs to make more effort and to be alone for a while, so that he needs to learn the price of happiness to be together again with his beloved one. Ismalia, although everything, she comes and helps him at least once a month, and she is right there right now to meet not only him but also Andre, Vicente, and Aniceto, and help all the other ones. So it is a very interesting story, and we should really stop and read it again so that we don't fall prey to those ones who really are supposed to be our friends, but sometimes they are not our friends, just like this. It happened in Alfredo's love story.
Yeah, that's right. And the last sentence of the chapter sums it up saying, slander is an invisible monster that attacks people through careless ears and unwary eyes. So like you said, we need to be very careful whom we pay attention to, whom we believe in, and especially to double check any information that we receive, especially regarding our most intimate relationships. In chapter 18, Information and Explanations, Ismalia returns to the circle, so the matter is dismissed, and they talk about what's going on right now. And like you mentioned last week, 1944, the book was published, so the Second World War was still going on, and they're describing the difficulties that they had because so many spirits discarnated in England, Holland, Belgium, France, etc. So it was decided to transfer at least 50% of the war's discarnates to our new world centers. And there are more than 400 right there in the holding area of that aid station. So not necessarily a spirit who discarnates will stay in the same area where it discarnates, which is normally the case, but obviously war is an extraordinary situation, so other measures are necessary. But just for us to have an idea, 400 are with them there at the moment, and they have 500 co-workers. So we think our aid station may be like a really small area, but like the descriptions that we got, that there are several buildings, etc. So it is quite a big structure that is there. And for sure, the earth was in a very, very bad shape. And the victims of the war needed to be attended to in any way that matters. And just a curiosity is that Aniceto remarked towards the end of the chapter that he visited Alvorada Nova, which is another spirit colony in higher realms, and learned that they shut down their vibrational borders in the sense that they put maximum security measures to say, well, you've started the war there on Earth, so we must bear on our own shoulders the weight of the production of evil that we cause.
Yeah, it's a consequence, right? It's interesting that sometimes we tend to see these things that, oh, they're not being charitable. But what it is to be charitable if you are the ones causing the problems, and then like you destroy, let's say you're in a building and then you destroy the pillars of that building, and then you ask people to take you out of the building because the building that you just destroyed, and this is an act of not being charitable. So it's basically the same thing. So if you're destroying yourself, there will be consequences. After everything is settled down, then we can come to help. But while it is going on, there is a limit to what we can do while some things are going on. So that's basically what it is. We created the war. We were going through the war. They were doing whatever they could, but then there are limits to what they could do. So it is very interesting how Aniceto says that. And just another point in the war, right, which is really interesting, is that Alfredo says close to the end of the chapter as well, when he says that he visited Europe, and then there was he was surprised because it was night, it was dark, but there was this beam of light, and then he could see it from far away. And then when they were getting close and close, he found out that they were in a church. And then in the church there were brave Christians. They were singing, and then the minister was reading a passage from Acts where Paul and Silas were singing at midnight in prison. their clear voices rising up to heaven in notes of fervent trust. So there were bombs outside, darkness and everything, but faith was there, and they believed in God. They couldn't do anything else, so they stood calm, and whatever happened to them, they were probably being helped because although darkness was surrounding them, they had their lights inside of themselves, just like what happened to Andre, Aniceto, and Vicente when they were coming from one place to another, and then they have their light inside of themselves as if they were praying at all times. So it's always up to us. We need to keep the light up inside of ourselves, because sometimes there are no light outside of ourselves, outside of where we are walking or where we are living at that specific moment. And then we move on to chapter 19, which is breath, and we're going to they're going to talk mainly here about the one type of passes, right? That's not very common. We don't see it very frequently on the Spiritist Center, but they talk about how we breathe, and that there is some application for the breath, for what comes out of our mouth in terms of healing or helping to heal other people around us. But for those who want to use this type of passes or this type of magnetic treatment, they need to have to eat well, to eat healthily, to have their mouths full of good words, or that they need and we need to talk about goodness, and our minds and our our thoughts, they need to be aligned with goodness as well, so that everything that comes out of me is always towards goodness, so that we can be more effective when we need, or when we can use these techniques, the passes, or even to help other people with by talking on a spiritual assistance at the Spiritist Center, where a person comes and wants to talk to somebody. Can you imagine if a person is trying to get a help from a person at the Spiritist Center, and you get there and you smell the person who is speaking, smell alcohol, for example, or smell cigarettes, or whatever it is. So it means that, okay, how can you give me advices if you are in this type of situation? And this is what we can see, but or feel, right, or smell. Imagine if we could see, just like Andre can, Aniceto can, what my mind emanates, right? What types of thoughts I have during the day. So it is very interesting that they talk about this with when they talk about therapies, even physical ones. But there's not only physical therapies at the Spiritist Center. If we are talking to somebody trying to help, it's another type of therapy that the Spiritist Center can help. And if I'm not at the Spiritist Center, if I'm talking to a friend, I can as well give advices, or good advices, by using what I have inside of myself, that light that we just talked about. What do you have to add here, Francisca?
Well, I like one of the quotes from Alfredo. Even on earth, the healing breath is a sublime human privilege. However, while incarnate, we are very slow to lay hold of the great treasures that are ours by right. We usually live there, wasting time on fantasies, believing in futilities or feeding suspicions. Those who could grasp the far-reaching implications of this subject could create highly effective breath therapy processes. And you explained it already, so I'm not going much into it, but of course, in the last 70 plus years, there has been some developments in breath therapy processes. But what struck me was that we all need to breathe. It's the essential thing we have to do, we need to do, otherwise we can't live here. But yet we are not using the full potential that is there. And this is not only true for this subject, but for many others as well. So then we come to chapter 20, Defenses Against Evil. And Andrea and Vicente are surprised on how many fortifications the aid station has, and notice as well that there is a white flag symbolically for peace on top of it. And so they find out that there are many spirits dedicated to evil who want to stop the work of the good that is being carried out in the aid station. And therefore, Alfredo and his team need to protect themselves. They're not going to attack anybody, obviously, but with everything, you need to defend sometimes if you are being attacked. And he tells this popular story from India where the snake first is attacking people, and then a wise man comes along and says, oh, you need to be charitable, you need to be kind to the people. So now it turns around, and all the people that pass along the way attack the snake, and she doesn't do anything to defend herself, and she's wounded and beaten up by the next time the wise man passes by. And he says, oh, what have you been doing? Don't attack the children of God, our brothers and sisters on the same pathway of life, but do defend your part in the work of the Lord. Neither bite nor harm, but keep the wicked ones away. Hiss and show them your fangs. So the attitude is very different. It doesn't mean that we have to let ourselves be beaten up or not to defend ourselves when it is necessary, but to show our fangs when it's necessary, right, Mackenzie?
Yeah, that's true. We need to. We don't need to attack. It's like he says in the end of the chapter. I don't think the fable needs any comment. It is something that we really need to really understand. Just like we were talking about, people saying, "Oh, this is not charitable." Oh, no, not charitable is to be attacked. But if you're being attacked and you need to defend yourself, defend your family, then you defend your family. Uncharitable is to attack without warrant, attack without any necessity, attack just because I want to attack or I want to take something from you. So it is very interesting that that they tell this story at the end, because it really makes us think. You cited the last sentence, and that's the one that I wanted to cite it as well, because we need sometimes, if we really need to say, hey, look, you're crossing the line. There's no need to do this, and please just don't do it. No harm intended. I don't want to go into any troubles. So that's how we should keep it anyway. So it is interesting, because after he tells the story, Alfredo smiles, right, as if he is thinking of something that we cannot understand, how deep he can understand this story and what he needs to do and what he has done already. And but they keep going, right? There's so many things to learn, there's so many things to go through. Then we reach chapter 21, Demented Spirits, where they go to this place, and then they see these hundreds of spirits housed together in vast lodgings, and then they start seeing these spirits who are very, very sick. It's weird that they are. It's like an asylum of people who are filled with lunatics, as he says here, congregation of lunatics in a huge asylum, and then they're gonna meet those spirits. They're gonna meet a few of them. They're going to talk to a few of them. They meet Malachias or Malachias, Aristarchus, and a few other spirits. Because of some of these spirits, they still think that they are incarnated, right? They're still It's interesting that we die, and that there was a quote that I wanted to mention in a previous chapter that I didn't say anything. When one of these spirits, maybe Alfredo or Aniceto, he said that when we die, maybe it was Andre, and he says, we heard so many stories about heaven and hell, that when we discarnate, we think that transition changes us. And actually, when we die, we are still the same. And some of us still even believe that we didn't die. And some of these spirits here, that they find they still think that they're alive, quote unquote, here, right? That they're still incarnated, alive. They are. But I mean, it is very interesting that if we don't try to live or try to reach for a spiritual understanding of life, when we die, it's kind of hard for us to detach ourselves from our physical lives.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting is that Alfredo says in the end that in the physical realm they would all be regarded as completely normal. So here in the spirit world they are lunatics, right? But in the world they wouldn't be any different from us, right? So because they have been clinging to materialistic problems for a long time, like you said, that's why they most likely don't want to know or want to understand that they are not in the flesh anymore. But also he describes the attitudes that they want help for the individual situations. They accuse others, but don't want to see what was their own part of the problem. And he says, well, I've tried to listen to all of them, give them an idea of how we work here, but for now to no avail. And then he uncovers what was really behind, because he says, for example, the gentleman waiting for his inheritance wanted to cheat his cousins. The woman who was so keen on knowing what's going on in her house, she discarnated while she tried to poison her husband. So it's always interesting to see different parts of the story or the different sides of the medal, because when only one person comes forward saying, oh, this is my perception, and especially in these cases, I'm innocent, I just want the good, and then we get to know the behind the scenes and we say, oh, it's not how it looks like. So
yeah, there's at least two sides of the story. And people, I heard this quote once that I find it to be true. There are at least three sides of a story: mine, yours, and the truth. So it is interesting that once a person comes and tells us a story, we usually tend to believe that story and then say, okay, this is the whole truth. But it is very interesting that how much we forget that there are so many sides to these stories that we don't even imagine and we don't even know.
Yeah, true. The book continues on with chapter 22, Those Who Sleep. So there are many different possibilities on how we can arrive in the spirit world. And like you mentioned before, the impression or the idea we have of heaven and hell sometimes, others consider nothing after death and think they're going to sleep forever. And that's it. Like one big sleep, that was it. And he says exactly people who thought like that are in this ward, sheltered, still asleep, and about 2,000 of them. So we get an idea roughly with the numbers that keep on coming how big the aid station is. So, but they were not sleeping peacefully. Most of them had nightmares, and you could see on their faces how unrestful they were. Alfredo explains, well, we can't attend to everybody with everything at the moment because we don't have the skilled personnel for that. So we separated the 400 most likely to wake up, and they will receive more intense treatment. The others obviously will get nourishment and medication every day, but only those who are more likely to awaken, so to speak, will get more assistance.
Yeah, these teachings by Alfredo, I'm always confused when we get to these, because sometimes Aniceto talks, sometimes Alfredo talks, so we never know who is actually talking. But it doesn't matter really, because it's all Andres' retelling of this part. But this teaching of Alfredo or Aniceto about why they are sleeping, they go into so many details. It's so deep, and it's so important for us to really understand that we sleep. I'm just going to read this small part. He says they sleep because they have been magnetized by their own negativistic concepts. They remain paralyzed because they preferred narrow-mindedness to understanding. So it is for us to really stop and think about how wide open is my idea of my life, of life itself, or am I narrowing my options down and then just becoming a negative person, denying everything, denying progress, denying all the things that we already learned. And if we get to this point, as these spirits got, we're going to be locked within ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why they are in this type of deep sleep and not restful sleep, which is more important, because people say, oh, they are sleeping, so they are resting. No, like you said, Francisca, it's a nightmare, which will lead us directly, although there's so much more here in this chapter, but it will lead us directly to next chapter, right? Which is entitled Nightmares, correct?
Yeah, that's true. I just want to finish the previous chapter with the second to last sentence. Everyone in life, my dear Andre, needs what is specific to them. Here we understand this law of nature to the fullest. So, like you said, it might be shocking for us to get those kind of informations, but actually we all take what we've acquired in our life when we go back to the spirit world. And if you don't believe in life after death, if you believe that we're going to sleep forever, that's what we get. And of course, every situation will be individual. And that is what I find so fascinating, that it's not like one for all solution, but that it is considered everything individually as well. So the nightmares is where Andre gets the chance to use for the first time his sense enhancement. So Aniceto tells him, oh, you go to this woman and examine the sister in detail. And he gives an advice. Don't dwell on her outward appearance. Study her with all the ability and insight at your disposal. And of course, Vicente is doing that with another person. And suddenly he sees the mental picture of the woman, her story, the nightmare that she was having, which was she had an affair with a married man, and then she decided to kill him. And he begged her not to do so, but she does it anyways. And the interesting thing is the attitude of Andre, because at a certain point in his reflections he says, how could I judge her if I didn't know anything about her past, her childhood, her education, her home environment, etc. So he didn't know what to do, how to help her. And then that was the point where he remembered that she was his sister in God, as we all are part of the universal family, a daughter of the same father, a sister who had become ill on the common path. Although he didn't know the cause at that moment, it didn't matter. He was searching in himself a way to help her. And that is when Aniceto stops the experience and says, you've done very well, both of you, Andre and Vicente. Your thoughts of fraternity and peace have helped this unhappy sister a lot. Because in the state she was in, she was receiving the energy of them. If they had been having bad thoughts or judging her, she would have been more troubled even. But this way around, she received some peace, some fraternity, and some calmness, some love, right?
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes, and that is a really, really interesting thing to notice on this chapter and on this teaching, because sometimes we think that to help other people is to, run 10 miles, run 50 miles, and, climb the stairs and do all these things. And but here, Aniceto tells them and tells us, look, what you did, it was awesome. You didn't judge. You didn't stop on her story. You felt her pain. You related to her. You emitted good thoughts towards her. And that was a really, really good way to help her at this moment, because that's what she needs right now. So sometimes it is for us, when a person comes to us, just to open the ears and listen to the person, right? Without judging the person. By doing this, we are already helping the other one, emitting good thoughts towards them. So actually, to help other people is to be open, to open our arms, our inner arms, to open our eyes, open our ears, and be there, be present for the other one, to really, really help the other one. So with this, they finalize this chapter in Aniceto and says, well, let's return to the center. We need to take part in prayer. And then that's when we're gonna hear one of the most beautiful prayers in all of the Andre Luis books. It's Ismalia's prayer, which which is the title as well of chapter 24, and where I'd like to point out that Ismalia means God will hear. We mentioned this when we were talking about Ismalia, and it's interesting that the prayer is done by her, meaning as if Andre, or who wrote this book, is trying to say, look, God will hear your prayer. And Ismalia here shows us that if we really feel it, if we really put our hearts into it, our deep good feelings into what we really wish, and if we know what we are asking for, God will hear our prayers. And this is a very beautiful prayer. Remember Francisca reading this prayer. Like I said, it is a very powerful prayer. She talks about mothers, fathers, couples, youngsters. So she talks about family, right? She talks about who we are. And she will say at one point, although they appear to be immobile, their spirit moves amongst anguishing afflictions that we sometimes cannot fathom. So it is going deep within those spirits who she is praying for, right? So that the good spirits can help those who are already ready to be helped, because unfortunately not so many of them will wake up at the end of the prayer, right? If I remember it correctly, some move and then only two wake up. But to those, that prayer was so powerful, was so important, that they were able to at least start to get out of their nightmares and move on again. She asks close to the end of the prayer, teach us to love them as Jesus loved us. So she is asking the powers of the universe to help us not to judge others, right? But to love others as Jesus loves us. So it is a very powerful chapter. If you want to go back and reread it again, I guarantee that you will be touched by just reading the chapter. You will be touched. I remember when I was recording this, I remember that sometimes I had to stop reading because I had to dry my eyes sometimes by reading this chapter. So it is a really, really powerful chapter.
Yeah, that's true. And her prayer's effects, like you mentioned a little bit as well, is that two had gotten up. And this might be little, but they say, no, it's actually a success because in quite a while no one had gotten up. And of course, it shows us that the positive effects that the prayer had on all of them doesn't mean that they will be healed, so to speak. So, and one of the teachings of the chapter is, let us do all the good without being anxious about it. Let us sow always and everywhere, but let's not get stuck by demanding results. The farmer can sow his seed at will and wherever he wants, but he must realize that the germination, growth, and results belong to God. So it's really, really important to keep on doing the good, to using our powers, and of course the spiritual powers of ourselves will be shown in a prayer. But what happens, like I mentioned before, the good energies that we get to the person will help them on some level. It doesn't mean that we're going to solve their problem, or in that case that they're going to get up and everything is sorted. No, there is a way, and there is it is a time for everything. So we should keep on sowing, staying on the path, doing the good, without accepting any immediate results. If they come, fine. If they don't, let's keep on doing anyways. And then the prayer service finishes, and we move to chapter 26, listening to the workers. The workers were talking, and then Alonso makes a request to Alfredo because he wants to go back to Earth and help his family. And Alfredo alerts him, saying, "We do not always see things clearly enough to make the right decisions while on Earth. But here it is possible to determine more accurately what would be of lasting interest for those we love." So he tells him to be patient and to learn and work on himself much more before wanting to visit his family, because he said a little while ago he let two other workers of the aid station go to the Earth to help their families, but what they found there was so devastating for them that they didn't come back, and that they stopped their progress in a way because now they're entangled with their loved ones. Alfredo says to Alonso as well, "I believe that God leaves us alone sometimes so that we can learn all over again and make our hearts stronger." So after hearing this, Alonso says, "No, okay, I will wait. I will take your advice, and I will get stronger myself. And then when the time is right, I will be in a much better position to really help my family that is still incarnated."
That's true, and it's interesting that how much this teaching was given by Alfredo, and it is very interesting that he is basically talking about himself, right? He is talking about his story. He is alone, right? He cannot have his wife with him at all times, and he is telling, look, sometimes we need to be alone so that we can understand how important it is for us and for both of us to be together again. So it is really interesting, and most of the times we are more impressive when we are talking or trying to pass a point when we already lived that point, or when we had the experience around that same area. So it is interesting that it is Alfredo who is teaching this to not only to him but to us. So we have two similar stories, let's say, in this book, in two people talking about the same kind of problem that they have, just like Alfredo, just like Andre and Vicente, right? Doctors had problems while incarnated, similar, not the same, but similar. So they are together, learning with each other. So it's always in two or threes that we are able to find solutions to our problems.
Sure. And then in chapter 27, we get to know the slanderer, whose name is Paulo, who was that false friend in Alfredo's last incarnation and caused all the trouble. And he didn't do that only to Alfredo, but to other people as well. And at the time being, he can't pronounce, or he has much difficulty to pronounce "thank God" because he abused his communication abilities in a way that he needs to retrain himself to be able to say that. And but what is really interesting, so Alfredo and Ismalia brought him to the aid station and are helping him there without him knowing who they were. But the process that Alfredo has been going through is what I want to point out. First, he approached Paulo with a need for reconciliation. Next, as a charitable person. Later, he gained understanding by comparing their situations, which is something you mentioned just now in another situation as well. Then he felt compassion, and soon thereafter sympathy. And now he has achieved true fraternity, the sublime love of a brother for his ex-enemy. So this is beautiful, explaining the process that we all need to go through if we don't like somebody or we have some problems with a person, either in this life or in different lives in this world or in the spirit world. So that is what is waiting for us, or maybe we are in one of the steps of the process right now. So it's a good reminder. But then it lightens up a little bit, and we come to chapter 28, social life. Mackenzie.
Yeah, that's true, and we meet new people, right? We meet the bachelors and their two young daughters, and it's we're gonna find like this social scene where we are together with a group of friends. We are talking, but what is interesting is that, and I'm going to read just this small sentence here. That Andra says, we were in a social scene inaccessible to falsehood. So it is very interesting that to socialize with people, it's part of our lives. We are social beings. We need other people, right? There's no problem in having parties. There's no problem in being together with people, in talking. But the thing is, how are we gathering together, right? There was a feeling of great happiness. He didn't observe a single note of undignified conventionalism as he might have on earth. So it is interesting that it is a point where we want to strive to achieve is what Andre is describing here. And this chapter is so light, right? It's so, like you said, it lightens up so much that we see as if, oh, how much would I love to be in a place where we could have this type of gathering, and at the end of it, I would not feel the burden of having been in a place. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what are we doing to create this this environment where we are, right? Because it's interesting how we expect this from other people, but sometimes we forget that we are one of the other people who really need to do our part, right? We need to do our part, just like they say later on. It's essential to learn how to serve, meaning I need to be the one doing at least something. But sometimes we forget that, and we wait for the others to do, and we waste our time, basically.
Yeah, that's true. And chapter 29, interesting news. Andre and Vicente are talking to Cecilia and Aldonina from Mr. Basile's daughter and niece, and they just compare what Nosolar is like and how privileged Andre and Vicente are, and comparing and explaining what the difference is in the work at Campo da Paz, because they're much closer to the earth, so the environment, the spiritual environment is much heavier. And Andre is actually and Vicente as well, they're quite surprised that so. But all the explanations are in the chapter. So, and then they continue with a friendly conversation in chapter 30, where they talk more about their family relationships and that one of her sisters actually married in Campo da Paz and moved to Nosolar. So we see how the relationships work there as well, and the importance that we need to love with the soul and not only the body, that there's much deeper levels to love than we know here on earth, and the reasons why we get together. So they talk about that, and there are interesting things for us to know, but as time is running out, we need to speed up a little bit. So in chapter 31, we have Cecilia at the organ, Mackenzie.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a compare and contrast with the next chapter, which will be a sublime melody. So one is done by a person who is in love with somebody, right? But it has more of a touch of materialistic, if we could say that, more connected to earth. And then we see Cecilia playing the organ, and I remember that we used at least one song here while we were reading and discussing the chapter, and the music seemed to come from the depths of her soul, immersing us in sublime emotion. And then she sings it. She sings this song. She plays a music or a piece from Bach. And it is a very interesting. And then she excuses herself at the end, and Ismalia says, "No, look, to be devoted is not a crime, my good Cecilia. Love is the light of God, even when it shines at the bottom of an abyss." And I also remember tearing up, just as I am right now when reading this. Is something that really touches us, because sometimes we think of this of love, like you said, as something that's only matter, but it is much more than this. It's at this level here, it really shines anywhere we are. And then we go to the sublime melody from Ismalia when Aniceto asks Ismalia to perform a musical motif from her higher plane, and then she dedicates the melody to Aniceto. And it is wonderful, wonderful. And we also played this song that a Brazilian group put it into music. Of course, the lyrics are all in Portuguese, but it's a wonderful, wonderful melody. And what she says here is amazing. May our first thought of love be directed to your heart each day, talking to God. Right, Father of infinite love, extend to us your bounteous and holy hand. So it is another prayer, another beautiful, beautiful prayer from Ismalia. And Andre says that Cecilia touched our sentiments, but Ismalia had enraptured our spirits, uplifting us to the Supreme Father. So this prayer, Ismalia, another Ismalia's prayer, is really, really wonderful for all of us. And then we get close to the very end of this second part of the messengers with chapter 33, when they need to move on, they need to go come to earth, to physical earth, and the chapter is entitled En route to earth, Francisca.
So they prepare for their next part of the journey towards earth. They're using a car for quite a while, and then they're going to walk because of the vibrational resistance that there is. And it's quite an exhausting journey that they have. And when they get to Rio de Janeiro, they are exhausted and go to the beach first, to recover, so to speak. But I think we can talk about this a little bit more next week when we conclude this summary with the third part, starting on chapter 33 En route to earth, or 34 workshop of Nosolar, which we're going to talk about how they arrive on earth, what they're going to do during the learning experiences here. As for now, we thank you all very much for being with us today, and we hope you have enjoyed these recollections as much as we have, and your heart is lighter and you're filled with motivation to have a great week, to put into practice what we've learned. And of course, to go back to some of the chapters, if not all of them, and to study them in much more detail with Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.